Hello, and I wanted to talk a little bit today about the Fujifilm GFX100S. I've had this camera for about a year now, and I kind of want to just go over my impressions of it using it for landscape photography. So a little background, I started out landscape photography using like the Canon 5D Mark IV and the EOS R. I then switched to Fujifilm and I used the GFX50R before I got the 100S. And then the day that the 100S was released, I pre-ordered it and I received it sometime about mid-March 2021. By the way, I have no affiliation with Fuji or anything. This is just my own impressions and thoughts on the camera. Let's start with the sensor, which is kind of the big thing about this camera. This has a 102 megapixel medium format sensor, which means it's 44 millimeters by 33 millimeters. If you compare that to a full frame sensor, which is I think 36 millimeters by 24 millimeters. So it's significantly larger. It's also a 4:3 format aspect ratio. Full frame is a 3:2 form aspect ratio. The sensor in this camera is really quite good. It has incredible dynamic range, and the shadow recovery is just phenomenal that you get out of this. And I had the same thing with the 50R. When I had that, the shadow recovery was amazing, and I think this is even better. This gives somewhere in, I think it's upwards of 4+ stops of shadow recovery that's available in this camera, which is just flat out phenomenal. What that means is, and for me, it took a little bit of getting used to, is you really almost shoot expose to the left a bit versus exposing to the right. In other words, you get the histogram set up and you want to make sure that you really protect your highlights, because you can bring up those shadows in post really, really nicely and really easily so that you get great shadow recovery. The camera also, the sensor system, the whole camera system is very ISO invariant. I did a video a little bit ago where I did some ISO testing on this, and it is extremely invariant. I had images at 100 ISO. I increased it by 5 stops, and it looked almost identical to the ISO 3200 image taken with all the same settings. Because this has such a large sensor, 102 megapixels, it really affords you a lot of room to do cropping. And I've found that I've done a lot of cropping, whereas with the EOS R and the 5D Mark IV, I would always try and use the whole frame in the sensor. I think that had like a 30 megapixel sensor in it. This has got such a huge sensor in it that it lets you get a lot of cropping options. And so I've ended up doing a lot of square crops. I go with 4:5 crops, 3:2 crops, 2:1 crops, 3:1 crops, all out of just one image, and you can get multiple images out of one shot, which is very, very nice. In fact, you almost have to learn to shoot a little wider than what you normally would, because you're going to use that crop area very much. Because this is such a large sensor, the medium format sensor, there is a downside to it, and that is depth of field. This has a very shallow depth of field. This is just natural. This is the physics of this type of camera system. I have on this camera here, this is the 23 millimeter lens, which in a full frame equivalent, which is a crop factor of 0.8, this is about an 18 millimeter lens. Remember, as you go longer focal length, you get shallower depth of field. So I'm getting a longer focal length here, which means you're going to end up focus stacking more with this if you want a sharp image from front to back. Now, that's what I started out doing, and it was great. They have built into this, they have focus stacking, so you can focus bracketing, so you can actually go and take the shot and set up focus bracketing, and you can have it do 1, 2, 3, 100 steps on the focus bracketing, and you just hit the shutter once and it does them all. But after a while, I started to realize and started to learn to use the blur, kind of embracing the blur in the image, to use it as a tool, use it as a effect in the image to emphasize something else in it. And it's not a sharp, it's really sharp, and then it's blurry. It's a very smooth fall off on the blur, so it's not really that bad. But it can be noticeable in some instances. You want something very sharp all the way through, you're going to have to focus stack, especially if you got the camera low and your foreground subject's really close and your next subject is quite a ways away. You're going to have to focus stack. That's just how that's going to work. But it's the sensor system is great in here. It is the exact same sensor as in the GFX100, but it's a fantastic sensor. Okay, so let's talk about the body and the ergonomics on this camera. To begin with, this thing is heavy. It's a big camera. The body itself weighs about 930 grams. And to compare that, my 50R weighed about 800 grams. And if you look at that compared to, say, a full-frame mirrorless camera like an EOS R or R5 or the Sony A7 series, it's significantly heavier. But if you compared that to, let's say, like the 5D Mark IV or, you know, a D850, it's really not that much different. Size-wise, this is about the same size as, say, as the old DSLRs we used to carry around. You know, the 5D Mark IVs, the D850s. It's about the same size. Compare it to a Sony A7 series or the EOS R, it's significantly larger. Compared to the 50R, it is taller and it is narrower than the 50R. It is also a little deeper, and that's because that's a rangefinder style and this has this handle on it. It is weather sealed and very well weather sealed. I've had this in rain and wet conditions and it hasn't missed a beat. It's also extremely well made. I mean, I've had this for a year and I don't even see a mark on it, and I use it in the field all the time. So it's my primary camera. I use it in the field a lot. It's been in sand dunes, it's been in deserts, it's been in rainstorms, it's been in all kinds of things, and it just keeps coming back for more. I don't use a strap on this camera. It's got a very nice handle grip here. It fits in very nice into my hand. I do have a Really Right Stuff L bracket on it, but it fits into my hand really nice, very clean, very easy, very nice, easy to handle. It's not a problem to carry around and, you know, carry on your side or anything like that. It also has a flip out screen. This has been really handy. You know, I go and I set up, especially if you're setting up something low, it's nice to get the screen down and you can see what's going on. Or if you got it set up really high, you can set the screen up and face down and look at it. It also, and then the 50R did the same thing, but this one, unlike that, you can tilt the camera out. So this is handy if you've got a portrait framing and you're set up down low, you can look at it down there. What I wish it had is I wish it came back the other direction, because when you have this set up high, you can't do that. You can't tilt the camera back and see what you're going to, what you're filming, what you're taking a picture of. So that's kind of generally a pain. You can, on this, like pretty much all Fuji cameras, you can set all the buttons, and that's really handy. I've got, I usually keep these two buttons here set up, these two dials set up for shutter speed. I use the dial for the aperture, and I use the Q button, which is in the back here, right here, to set my ISO, because usually I don't change that often. Once I set it, it's pretty much set, and I don't want to accidentally bump it and adjust it to the wrong setting. It also, unlike a lot of the Fuji cameras, it simply has the program auto manual dial on here versus having a dedicated shutter speed, dedicated ISO dial, exposure dial, and then a ring for the aperture. So it's a little more of a modern style, but that's okay. Some people have complained that there's no D-pad back here, but truth is, when you're carrying it and using it, it would really just get in the way. It's got a nice little joystick here, and I like this. This is different than on the X-T4 or any of the 50R. It's actually got a little better grip and very easy to use. So I've never really had a problem with that. Now, the downside, of course, with this body is it's heavy, and that is the big problem. Carrying it around, if you got to carry it a lot, it gets rather heavy. One final thing about this body setup here is the battery. This uses the Fuji NPW235 battery. This is the exact same battery is used on the X-T4, which is really quite nice. A lot of times when I go out and I have this camera and the X-T4, it's nice. I can take one battery charger, one battery, and I'm good to go. Or one battery type. I can take the spare battery for this works in my X-T4. This is what I'm trying to say. The other thing is you cannot get a battery grip for this. So what you got is what you got there. It's a single battery. But I've never had a problem with it. I mean, I've used this thing in the field quite a bit. I've done astrophotography, I've done star trails with it and such, had it on for quite a while, and it's never been a problem. So battery life hasn't been a problem. If you really have to, you can plug in. There's a USB connection on the side over here that you could plug in and put an external battery in, and you'd have plenty of power. You can also charge it that way. In fact, it does not come with a charger. That's how you have to charge this camera. Another nice feature about this camera is that it, and this is actually with most Fuji cameras that I know of, is it will let you go and set the shutter speed all the way up to 1 hour. So you aren't limited to 30 seconds. You can set it at 1 minute, 2 minute, 4 minute. You can go all the way up to an hour, which is really, really nice. You don't have to go to an interval timer, intervalometer, anything like that. You can just set it. You don't have to go to bulb mode. This camera has also got IBIS in it, so image stabilization. To be honest, I don't use it that much. I'm almost 99% of the time my camera's set up on a tripod, so I actually turn it off because I don't want that the sensor shaking. If I'm shooting handheld or something, I turn it on and I use it. If you're shooting video with this, that would be very, very handy. But otherwise, it's, that's, I don't use it. I don't use IBIS that much, so it's not that big of a deal to me. Okay, let's talk about the lenses, because that's really good. You can have the greatest camera body in the world, but if you got a bad lens, it's not going to take a good picture. The Fuji in-on lenses, I guess that's what they call them, Fuji in-on, are really good, really high quality lenses. These are really nice lenses. I've had no problems. They're solid. I've had these lenses. I used these same lenses on my 50R. I've used them on this. I've had them in snowstorms. I've had them in rain. Once again, they just hold up great. No problem at all. But the downside is, first off, they're very expensive. These are not cheap lenses. The typical lenses, they are coming out with some cheaper ones, but typically the lenses are in the, I'm going to say probably $1,500 to $2,500 range. So they are not cheap lenses, and especially when you get into the bigger ones. The other downside to the lenses is there's a limited selection. This is the 23mm. This is the widest lens that Fuji makes. Really, that hasn't been too much of a problem for me, but it is the widest lens. Also, it's f4. So if you want to shoot astro with it, it's a little slow. But once again, it's not horrible. You get good ISO, low light ISO results with this camera. So f4 is not the end of the world. In addition to the 23, I personally have a 45 to 100, which I really like. In fact, I probably use that the most, and which kind of surprised me, but I end up using that the most. And I also have a 100 to 200 lens, and I have the 1.4 adapter for that 100 to 200 lens. So they do make one more lens longer, which is the 250mm lens. That is it's a prime lens. It's just 250mm. It's extremely expensive. I think it's $3,500 to $4,000. It's an expensive lens, and it's big and it's heavy. Don't have that, but that's one of the downsides, is you don't have this long lens option. The thing I will say is these lenses are heavy. They are very heavy. There's a lot of glass. You've got a big image sensor. You've got to get a big image circle. So that's one of the downsides, is you're going to have heavy lenses. And there are limited options on lenses with this camera. They're expanding them, but there are not a lot of options all over the place for the different types of lenses that you can get. And there really are very few third-party options for lenses. They are expanding. I know they just released, I think it's a 30 to 70, or maybe it's a 35 to 70mm lens. They have, I think it's a 20 to 30 or so zoom lens that they're coming out with. I've heard that they are making a tilt shift lens, which will be really nice. I will be very interested in that lens. In general, it's not too bad. I haven't really found myself, though, in a point outside of having a longer lens in a situation where I've really been upset with the lens choices that I have with me. I've always been able to find something that works. So while it sounds like I've been dishing on these lenses pretty bad, they are extremely good lenses. They are very sharp and very, very good color, everything. They are just fantastic lenses. It's just you don't have a lot. They're heavy and they're very expensive. So take that for what it is. So kind of in summary, what do I think of this camera? First off, this is a phenomenal camera, and it is a great camera. After a year of use, it is a great camera for taking landscape pictures. I've really enjoyed. I enjoy taking this out, shooting with it. It is just it's a great camera. I really love this camera. But one thing I will say, this is not a camera for a beginner. First off, it's really expensive. The camera body alone is $6,000. That's really not something in the range for a beginner. It's also one that, at least in the landscape world, I feel rewards you for slowing down and taking your time. Really finding your composition, adjusting your exposures, adjusting your focus, taking your time, and finding things right. And then it really rewards you. This is a camera that does not like to be rushed, I guess is the way to describe it. It doesn't take pictures fast. It doesn't want to be set up fast. You have to take your time. Where is this camera good for? Obviously landscape, I like it there. If you're shooting portrait, weddings, maybe commercial architectural photography, this is a great camera. If you're looking at doing wildlife, if you're looking at doing sports, fast action, this is not the camera for you at all. It will frustrate you beyond belief because it does not shoot fast. It doesn't have fast burst. I think the burst on it is in the 5 to 9 frames per second. It's not fast. So you can't go and take a whole bunch of shots. If you're into that type of system, I would suggest, one of the Canon mirrorless, the Sony mirrorless, Nikon mirrorless, something that's got a faster burst rate on it. For me, when you're going out and spending 30, 40 minutes setting up one shot, the burst rate doesn't mean much. It really doesn't. So, in general, I'd say this is a fantastic camera. I'm really happy with the investment that I made on it. It's just got so many cool features that it's really been a great addition to my camera kit. I hope this was helpful to you. If it was, let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. And please, if you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. And if you'd like, please share this video. Thanks. Take care.